2024, the 5th edition. Very exciting. And I'm just going to take a moment to say that it's pleasing to hear brother, festival, whatever, and not sister. So Sada, well done. So our conversation is on legacy, right? And specifically around legacy in the arts. I want to start from the end of that conversation. Very quickly, from all three of you, I want to get a sense of what legacy of the arts would look like, say, can't think that far, can you? Okay, you know what? Let's make it a generation between 30 and 40 years. It typically means that Sada's little boy is, he has inherited something. So let's say he's 30 today. Grace, I'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. So I'll start by giving Aisha's message. She said I should apologize to people that came in here to see her. She hopes to be here next year. So to answer your question, of course, the legacy in 30 years for me, the work that I do and what I hope for Northern Nigeria is that this generation is able to export the culture, the art, the way of the life of the people, our food, in premium ways, in less than primitive ways that people think that we are. That we're able to tell our stories, whether it's film, our artifacts, our people are able to understand and not interpreted the way it's seen. So that's, for me, that's the legacy that I hope that we, as me as a filmmaker, as curators, as a writer, as anybody in the arts and culture is able to export or showcase our culture and our people in a way people would appreciate better than they understand right now.
Thank you. Sada?
Same question?
Yes.
I feel it's very tricky. When you say legacy, I think of it and I think of Kaduna, for instance, and the work that we do. Sometimes we think we are working on a clean slate, but it's always building on something. So I'm thinking of what was it that we built upon and what is it now that others can build upon. So for Kaduna, people always say there is a lot of cultural activities happening. I think it's not just happening, it's because they've always been a legacy. I'm thinking of Festac 77. The only other place where Festac happened after Lagos was Kaduna. So there is that existing legacy, which, whether we know it or not, it's existing within the ecosystem, within the space, and it's easy to build upon it because you could find it ingrained within the people of that community. Outside of Lagos right now in Nigeria, Kaduna is the biggest artistic and cultural space, whether people agree or not. It's the truth. It's the biggest cultural space. So that's the legacy that has been built upon. I think that's the legacy that is existing currently that others will build upon eventually.
Thank you. Aisha, let's come to you now.
Yeah, so I think the legacy that I would like for us to be able to pass on to the next generation is a robust ecosystem. So art schools, so many more Kabafests in probably every state in such a way that every young child from northern Nigeria that is interested in the arts, that is inclined to the arts, is able to have a strong feel and a strong connection to the system wherever they are.
All your responses are interesting for various reasons. Grace, with your response, I mean, there is a part of the arts we're already exporting. The biggest thing in the world today is Afrobeat, right? Sada, I'm pleased to hear you talk about legacy currently unfolding because there's a way that we feel as if, if we don't stand and we're proud of what we're seeing, then there hasn't been some sort of legacy laid. And Aisha, your comment is interesting because in a conversation I had with Lola just yesterday, we were talking about nearly 15 other festivals that have popped up in the north specifically because of Kabafest. So clearly there is an enduring legacy that we're currently experiencing. Now, every time we talk about the arts, the smoking gun in the room, the elephant in the room is funding. I want to talk about funding first from the perspective of endowments, drawing parallels with places like the US, where when you hear names like Carnegie, Rockefeller, Franklin, Washington, These were individuals who set up some sort of fund. I think the most popular one is Nobel, right? We know that an endowment was set up and that legacy has endured. So, Grace, let me start with you, particularly from the film industry, and whether there is room to establish, whether you see people who are willing to put their money there, Nigerians.
Are we talking about Nigerians or Northern Nigeria?
Across the board, really. I mean, there's no difference. The arts are suffering across the board.
Okay, there's a huge difference from northern filmmakers, what they've been able to achieve, what they're able to get to achieve what they're achieving right now, and the South. For me, when it comes to funding, I don't usually hold the government too much. I don't usually expect too much from the government because everywhere in the world, I don't think film is being funded really by the government in its entirety. I usually have problem more with the private sector. And then if I should say the government, I'll go back to like a place like Lagos where I live. A lot of the big blockbuster movies that we
Blockbuster.
see, yeah, on Netflix, everywhere. Some of them are actually funded by Lagos State government or in partnership. When I say funded, they might use a private sector, but they help the filmmakers over there. That's why I said, is it Nigeria or is Northern Nigeria? It is difficult here in Northern Nigeria. It's very difficult. Kaduna State helps, honestly, because even something like this is funding the arts, right? So I really give them kudos for that. And but funding to be able to make a film is really, really hard.
On average, how much?
Huh?
On average, if you were to give a ballpark figure.
Oh,
how
if I
much?
need if I need funding for a movie,
Yes.
if I want my movie to be on Netflix today, I wouldn't do a film less than 100 million. If I want it to stand out, to be able to pay my crew members, feed them for probably 1 month, hire a camera maybe for 50,000. That's the cheapest camera, by the way, 50,000 RID. When I did my movie 2 years ago, the camera was, to be honest, 200,000 RID. 200,000, that's the camera, then the lens. So if you want to do an average movie, 50 million, if you say they're going to laugh. And it sounds like big money, but think about maybe having 50, 60 people for a month and then your equipment. So private sector, I want to go back to private funding for private. I hold the private sector in the North a little responsible. I would like to call upon them because there you see individuals in the South contributing money, helping out. That was why I was very excited when I saw, I think, a branch of the Sterling Bank, I don't know, for helping with this event. It's rare. If we don't fund the arts, we're going to keep complaining that, our movie is bad. Our this thing, they're just singing, they're just dancing, although there's a conversation around that. But the difference in funding Nollywood and here is huge. If I use old Nollywood, sorry, the beginning of Nollywood was funded by traders. They were just business people that contributed their money, gave to filmmakers, and they would go and do their movie and they would sell it. They understood that there was a business. They might not have cared about the movie or whatever they're saying, but they cared about their business. Unfortunately, here you twist. I work with Arewa 24 a lot. At some point, I don't want to go into extra, but it's difficult to even sometimes even get payments for I'm not specifically saying Area 24, I'm just saying organizations here, media organizations here in the North really, really suffer. The same thing with advertising. So private sector can come in advertising. You hear people say, well, if the program is not on, if it's not just about Kano State or Kano Indigens, we're not putting money for the adverts. And then you're wondering why they're doing programs that are only for very conservative or very not viewers. So funding is, you can't even talk, you can't finish talking about funding.
Don't worry, we've not finished it yet. And much of your response focused on government, right? And you did bring in some of the private sector. Aisha, I want to come to you. I'm going back to endowments, right? Because there's a structure around it. Fun fact, there's actually a law that sets up a national endowment fund for the arts. And it stipulates how that money, where money is sourced from. Interestingly, the law says from government from time to time. That's actually what it says. It's not specific. You are a creative director. You've worked largely here in the North. From what you've seen, would you say that there are companies that are willing to do things like what I don't want to use Netflix, unfortunately, because it's a foreign entity. Do I have a local example? Ebony, thank you. Ebony Life, right? Do you think that there are companies here in the north that are willing to fund the arts?
I can't speak for companies, but I would speak for people. And also, I'm going to give a global context, then come back home a little bit. So, globally, everywhere in the world, arts is funded by a system of patronage. The biggest patrons of arts are not artists themselves, nowhere in the world. And in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria specifically, we have artists that have been for years funded by those patrons. So the thing we have is like a gap in the patron sort of modernizing, right? You have the traditional singers, you have the political singers. They're constantly funded by patrons and they have money being pumped to them. So I think a big issue we have with funding is educating these people and trying to get them to understand that, the world is moving on. Art consumption is also different. So you can try to live a more enduring legacy beyond one praise song that, probably goes viral every election year by actually funding a sustainable structure that would, become self-sustaining and would encourage other people to also fund the artistic processes.
I might be nitpicking your example. I do wonder if we can call it an enduring, in any form, right? An enduring legacy if these individuals are thinking more around funding praise singers, which has political impact, and not so much arts for the sake of the arts.
So, everywhere in the world, even some of the endowments you've mentioned are sort of praise singers, right? You have funding coming from certain countries, certain institutions, and they have certain conditions for your work. Your work has to sort of adhere to a certain standard, or whatever you are producing as a condition of that grant then has to adhere to their standards, and they have to find it acceptable. And sometimes it's praise singing for the ethics of their country, it's praise singing for the foreign policy of their country. So I personally do not see a significant problem with that. I think it is important for artists to be able to explore wherever they can explore within certain, limits, of course. I don't think their freedom should be too caged, but I do not see the problem in if Carnegie Foundation is, whenever you get a Carnegie grant and you work, you create a body of work under that, you're praise singing for Carnegie. So I don't see it as a problem, really. I think it's something that we need to actually show the powers that be and make them see that this is enduring praise singing. This is praise singing for 100 years, not praise singing for 4 years.
So, Sada, practical examples. You set up the Hausa International Book and Arts Festival. It's done 3 years now, if I'm not wrong. And I'm excited by your response because that festival eclipses the different art forms which each of you represents on the stage here. Speak to us on how you are able to receive support. North versus the rest of Nigeria versus outside of Nigeria. How have you been able to set up HIBAF?
Maybe I'll start with Open Arts. Open Arts is the foundation that runs the House International Book and Arts Festival, among a lot of other things. In terms of funding, majority of our funding, and which I can say is also generalized with funding of the arts all over Nigeria, comes from outside of the country. Most of the money, and I'm taking Lagos now out of the equation. I know with Lagos, there is a lot of private sector funding that comes into the activities. And then that's why maybe I was happy when you said it's the same, because I also don't see it as Northern Nigeria, Southern Nigeria. It's Lagos, but I see it's the rest of the country. 90% of the funding for whatever art sector thing is concentrated in Lagos, which is understandable as a commercial capital. But in terms of outside of that, you can see now that there is a change in terms of the outputs. You can see Abuja, Kano, Kaduna, especially in terms of the creative arts, rivaling Lagos in terms of output and creativity. How many book and art festivals are there in Lagos compared to the rest of the country? But how much of the funding is going to Lagos compared to the rest of the country? With HIBAF, practically within the country, we've received support from the Kaduna State government through Samuel Arwan. I think he was here yesterday. I would say directly through Samuel Arwan, maybe not through the Kaduna State government directly, but through his office when he was the Commissioner for Security. Apart from that, I don't think we've received any funding from within the country for running the festival. And that's the practicality of it. We've spoken to a lot of people, which is the same challenge that she's mentioning. When you're talking of private sector, we've spoken to organizations, to banks. They don't understand that this can happen in northern Nigeria. From my experience, that's the conversation. They don't understand that this can happen, especially with the arts, which is different from the film. With film, it's more tangible in terms of, okay, I'm going to put this on Netflix. It's going to give me this sort of views. When you say you're going to curate an art exhibition, you're going to curate a festival, it's not tangible right now. And which comes back to your legacy. It's not something that I can measure right now and tell you tomorrow, I'm going to give you this number of views. It's not possible. We expect the art sector and the private sector to trust that there's going to be a legacy eventually. And that's why I mentioned Festac 77. So everybody in Kaduna knows Space 2000, which is like the biggest space where we are able to do events. Space 2000 was there in the 70s. So it seems that there's been a gap between the 70s, 90s, and 2000s, in that after the 70s and 80s, there was nothing until now. And which is the problem with sustainable funding. In that at that time, it's that there was ecosystem for funding, and then it died off, and then nothing happened till right now where it's coming. And that's where the legacy is. If you're going to support, you need to support through the endowments. You can't expect an arts festival, and we've had this conversation with the state government, with Kadipa. I know I've had this conversation with Kadipa, with the last administration, in that, and I understand that thought process is that, what are you bringing? Government just doesn't give money for free. But when you're putting money into the art, you're not giving money for free. You can see the ecosystem it's creating. You mentioned the festivals, that this single festival has proliferated. That's not for free. You're talking about people coming into Kaduna, paying into hotels, spending money, buying stuff. That's direct investment into the state government. We can't quantify that as the festival. It's not my job, because most of the time I'm expected also to map the ecosystem, apart from also curating the festival, which is not necessarily my job. So it seems that if I'm going to go to state government for funding, I need to tell them, oh, this is the ecosystem. But it's existing. We've been mentioning it yesterday. Lola at the opening ceremony mentioned that things are happening in Kaduna, and she doesn't know how. I felt as funders, as the government, this is an ecosystem that you should be like, what's happening? I should be interested in this ecosystem. I should be able to map it. I should be able to provide an endowment or call in the private sector. Because to me, it's more of a holistic approach. It's not just government, private sector, artists. It's more of that. Government does not need to have the money, but they can push corporate social investment and corporate social responsibility of contractors building roads. There are a lot of international organizations coming into Kaduna doing contracts. You could have a funding, 5% of whatever, 1% of whatever, have an endowment, make it open call, allow people, have somebody to manage it. You don't have to give it directly to artists. Art organization, artists, they need this money. They are existing. We know they are. They just need to apply to that. I know Aisha Augie wasn't here. She is now part of the Ministry of Culture. I wish she was here.
Aisha Augie.
Aisha Augie. In terms of, I know there is the direct investment, whatever that is being instituted right now. The problem with those, and you ask a lot of artists, is the first question is, how do we apply? Right now, the only open call available for artists to apply in Nigeria is by the Goethe Institute, the Cultural Support Fund. How much is it? $5,000. A government, a private sector can do much more than that. You just need to have it available. And I think that's the practical reality of what we're experiencing right now.
Can anyone tell he's touched? Yeah.
Nabila,
And Sada, you started to touch on a number of things with your comments. Grace, I'm going to pick from there and throw it to you. The flip side of money, especially if you're expecting it from private sector and sometimes from private individuals, is that they do want to see returns, tangible returns. And what is tangible is simply that money comes back to the bank, right? So I want to talk about the sustainability of this legacy, where funding goes into the arts, establishes a legacy, and then we have an ecosystem that's built from it because people have put money in and seen that that money can come out. When you gave the example of Nollywood traders, we can draw parallels to other countries. It is that private individuals started, some of them because they loved the arts, others simply because it was financially beneficial. then you build some tentative structure. Government becomes visionary, they see it, they build more solid structures, and then the ecosystem takes off on its own. So I'm curious about what sort of, whether that model is applicable here in northern Nigeria.
Um, so when Sada was speaking, I think earlier, was it today or yesterday, someone was saying times have changed. This model worked and could work, but reality is that everyone wants their money back. I think creatives are horrible in making money. They don't know how to make money. I've lost more money than I've made. And that's why you don't need just the creative people in the arts and culture ecosystem. We need business managers, they need financial advisors and stuff. So if, for instance, if you're curating an event like this, trust me, I know the difference is that sometimes our culture here, our quiet conservative culture, we don't think so much about how the money is going to come back or stuff. But over there, they're going to ask you. And if you want to really, really start changing things, there's so much passion can do. Even you, your passion, after a while, probably burns out and you do so much. So I think it can be replicated. But there, they will ask you how much, and they will find ways of making that money. Now, you might not make all the money back, but you're able to pay for it. Here, maybe we're expecting them to do everything, which is hard, which is difficult. And so what I'm saying is that it's possible to monetize certain things and get back if we expand our thinking and kind of work on the business aspect of it. Just thinking we're entitled and somebody's just going to be love Northern Nigeria so much is going to bring out millions. Yes, we can get that. But if we base our planning on that just for, okay, this year we get it. Next year, how are you going to do it? I think this this generation thinks about money a lot, and we as creatives or artists have to start thinking of where is the money going to come from. Work hard, get it somewhere, ask uncles and stuff, find ways, but it helps you to actually even think of it in terms of your ROI and stuff. If you don't hit it, it's fine. You keep building and somehow, but to just depend on people, I feel like it's challenging and it's very frustrating.
Sada, please go ahead. It
yeah.
seems Aisha wants to add on to that. Okay, you know what? Let's take it this way.
Which I understand with Grace, and I mentioned in certain sector, but when you're talking about the creative arts, especially with spaces like this, no matter how much you ticket this, you're not going to have a return on the money that is being put to produce this. No matter how much the investment that comes in terms of advertisement and all of that is not going to cover the cost of running this. All it does is it reduces that balance. And that's why in terms of, because this spaces is not about creating a product to sell, it's about inducement of that ecosystem. And that's why I think throughout the world, the only festival that I know that is sustainable from ticket sales is maybe the Hay Festival, which is a very global festival. Outside of that, I don't think there's any creative arts festival that will be able to say, sustainably, I'm going to collect your money, give me a loan
I don't
of.
think festivals will raise the whole money for you, but it's also helpful if you find diverse ways of managing it so that you can run some things.
I'll interrupt both of you, mostly because you guys are going to have another conversation, and I feel like LS might join you there because Sada said some things that touched and she understood. And it's fascinating to watch this conversation between you two because it is reflective of the forms of art you represent, right? Aisha, let me come back to you. You wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak about when we say it's a whole ecosystem. As I said before, the biggest funders of arts are usually not artists. Please, those engineers, those future civil engineers that love arts, that love the pretty girls in arts, please, I beg you to succeed as much as you can in your career so that you can create these endowments and donate money to the arts. You must not be the best writer to be able to support writers. You must not be the best artist. Perhaps you wanted to be an artist and your parents forced you to do something else and you fell by the wayside. You can still always come back and support the arts. So I think that holistic thing of the attendees here who will not go on to be writers, but who will go on to be bankers, to be great industrialists, to be great agriculturalists. I think that they are also going to, be passionate about the arts and to be able to give back to the ecosystem.
So let's move away from financing as a way of supporting the arts, right? There's other forms. And earlier you were talking about a communication gap of sorts that exists. I want to talk about how critical, and this isn't, you know what, yes, it's very partial to me. The media is also very critical, right? In many ways, media is also a part of the arts, but I dare say that there's a higher responsibility, right, for radio stations, TV stations, everything online that is a media outfit. So let's talk about that. Sada, a few days ago, I saw a member of your team tweet about how difficult it was to get even journalists here in northern Nigeria to see the importance of covering, in this case now it would be Hibaf, right? With Kabafest, you've got Kaduna there slapped right onto the name, so you ignore government at your own peril. Speak to us about what media support would look like.
I don't think it's difficult getting the media. The media covers a lot of what we do at Openers and at Kabafest. Um, Actually, any other partner outside of financial partners, it's not very really difficult getting that. And that's why Grace points come into how you package the festival and how you produce it. You don't just expect people to just come in because you're just doing art to come and cover it. You also need to provide them with something as media, and we call them in-kind partners, those that do not provide funding. What are we offering them? I know there's a media house that somebody called me that it's been a year since Hibaf, but they've been showing Hibaf stuff on TV for a year, which means they have content. We provide them with material, which ideally they will have paid for to go cover, which we are providing now for free. So I think it's that sort of ecosystem also. The media, personally, I think they've been supportive. Of course, some of the big media houses, they don't, I think that's the one maybe you're referring to, they don't see it as what they need, and maybe that's the ethos of the media house. But I don't think we've had any challenge with the attendance, with the community. It's been really wholesome. It's been really supportful with the media. It's been good. Even with the stakeholders, the government, the spaces that we've been using, that has been good. Working with the artists, working with curators, people sacrifice to come and collect ideally what they wouldn't get outside the country, but because it's what we do within the local ecosystem, they sacrifice to come do that. So I don't think it's been so much challenging. That has been actually heartwarming and supportive, the kind of response we've gotten from the community. My only problem, of course, is still with the government. I will say this maybe finally on the finance aspect. If every state government, and I was mentioning Goethe Institute having a 5,000, which is the German cultural organization, having a $5,000 open call. If every state in Nigeria will have a 5 million naira fund for the arts, we're not asking for so much. That should be enough to sustain the ecosystem. That should be enough to have artists be able to sustain what they're doing. And artists are selling works. I know we are looking at the tote bags for hip hop. That's an Kaduna-based artist creating that, which is going outside of it. We just need that little injection into the ecosystem and it will be good.
Please
Go
can I
ahead.
add something on funding for government? The federal government or the government generally, I feel like most of the time there are programs and projects that the government has packaged for creatives, just like what Sada is saying. The problem I have with most of those grants, loans and stuff is sometimes nobody hears of them. The information is not there. And even if the information is there, it's so difficult for you to access it. By the time you know about it, it's either gone and stuff. And you, like, out of 100 creatives around you, you can't show one person that has collected it. So the federal government makes available those fundings. Where does the money go to? So I feel like the government has responsibility to inform the public about what they're doing for creatives, which they're doing a lot. We have a minister now going around and we see how we have Aisha Augie. We have many people in places who are young and are part of the community. We just hope that that translates to Sada's festival, a film that somebody wants to make, Kabafest and stuff. So the policies of the government and the provisions of the government need to translate to actuality, let people see and let creatives benefit from it.
I'll just like to add, and I'm all about the ecosystem as a whole. Although I will say media houses have been doing quite a good job in covering the arts, but I will specifically speak more for my section of the arts, so the plastic arts, the fine arts. I think one disservice that media does to us is the lack of cultivation of arts writers, of people that actually have the proper context and the proper knowledge to write and to discuss about the arts, and in doing so to promote and actually facilitate interest in the arts. So a lot of times what happens is that we get the coverage, but the coverage is usually blasé, is usually misunderstood, is usually out of context. So I will say to media houses that sometimes may see that arts journalism is not profitable, art writing is not profitable, art criticism is not profitable, that it is actually a profitable venture and it would do tremendous things for the coverage and for us in the arts if they can actually, raise art writers. And we're happy to support them anytime, any day. And any writers here, please, art writing is very lucrative. If you need support, you can reach out to me after. Thank you.
You know, um, I guess the arts may not be the only place suffering there. I've seen some criticism of the media and technical aspects, really, our ability to engage with the subject matter to give substance. But this point allows me to go back to the legacy part of this conversation, because perhaps that's part of where we're missing it. Understanding what sort of legacy, what legacy is, and what sort of legacy we want to leave behind. And here I want to talk about the connection between the arts and identity. China had a cultural revolution, which wasn't very fantastic. A lot of people talk about the politics of it all, but the historians will tell you that that is where much of what the world knows about China today, that's the time it was shaped. If you think about the Italian artists, the painters, the sculptors, Michelangelo, Picasso, Da Vinci, identity there and the arts was actually tied to the church, right? And that was exported across the world. And here we are today, we're still talking about it, whether we know what the church is or not. So let's talk about the arts here in northern Nigeria and how important it is to our identity as northerners. Grace, I'll start with you because film is very easy. Every time I watch a movie, I see myself reflected or want to see myself reflected.
Identity of the northern identity is clear. It's out there for everyone to see. What I mean is, you can tell by what we wear, you can tell by how we speak and our food. Um, but sometimes I feel like, for me personally, I feel like the gift that I have as my identity as a northerner is when I left the north. So I was born and raised in Kano, and I stayed there for 27 years till I moved to the south. While I observed a lot and I knew we were beautiful, everything we had was beautiful, I appreciated it. Well, when I was in school, I wanted to be hip hop and stuff. But when I went back to Lagos, that was when I realized, wait, what I have back home is really, really unique. But somehow, in the movies that we've presented, yes, we do movies, Kannywood and stuff, but I don't necessarily personally see that we explore the culture in a way that, for instance, the Yoruba movies now that are all over Netflix, where it's a story, but it's within the culture, where the identity, you can't miss what they're trying to tell you and show you. Here we have, I'm sorry, like we've danced, we've sung, we've loved and stuff. Can we tell deep stories about our leaders, old Tafawa Balewa, like real stories? It takes, what I want to say also is, people have no idea how many filmmakers coming to the north always have in the last 3-4 years to make films. They come with a whole crew, they come with a whole cast, people that don't even speak out. So now I'm not being tribalistic, but what is wrong that our people can't tell these stories? Yes, I know it goes back to funding, but in our identity, well, the little that you have, just explore a little bit. Yesterday, someone said that Nupe person can come and say, just cause you're from Kano, doesn't mean you can't tell a story of a Kanuri man. It just takes research. So I feel our identity is in our content as well. We as filmmakers or curators should ensure that whatever we're showing a very vast collection of what we are and who we are. So for me, as film, our identity is not mistakable, but it's still hidden and it's still managed in a way that we think we're just producing for Kano people and Kaduna people just a little bit. What will it take for you to be so passionate about telling the stories to the whole of Nigeria? If we watch Indian movies and we like Indian movies and we like how they do and stuff, why do you think an Indian person wouldn't want to watch a Kano or a Kannywood movie with details of your culture. So for me, that's what I'm passionate about, to tell stories that kind of explore, not just sitting in the room, but everything that has to do with the North. I am also saying it again. Filmmakers, some of the big blockbuster movies on Netflix have not the Black Book. A lot of movies are there. And probably our very few of our actors have benefited from that, and that needs to change, and it needs to start changing with us. Again, I'm going to say the filmmaking industry doesn't just need actors and stuff. As a lawyer, you can be an entertainment lawyer. As you can create an agency that helps produce or provide actors to people. You can be a financial advisor. You can be an engineer. You can be a production designer that builds sets if you're an architect. So let's just the legacy of contributing to the arts. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Grace. Sada, you know, earlier when I broached this subject of legacy, you're a bit hesitant to capture it in a specific way. The thing is, if we're talking legacy, then we're being aspirational, right? Because we're talking about something that will outlive. And I want to come back once again to that question of deliberateness, because if we see the arts and see how it informs our identity, then we're more likely to be deliberate. Northerners are a proud people. You don't want to be misrepresented no matter where it is that you go, whether it's here in Nigeria or you find a lot of Northerners wearing their kaftans in Europe, in America, very proud about it. So from your perspective as someone who ties the different forms of arts at least once a year, what is that deliberateness? What should we start to talk about? What should we start to do?
Maybe I was avoiding legacy because I feel like sometimes it puts a burden in terms of what you're producing. Once you put legacy into your mind, you're thinking of being aspirational, of creating the greatest thing that will last forever. Honestly, when we're creating artworks in Kaduna, we don't think of that festival in December. It's actually the right now that we're mostly thinking of. The legacy comes, like you said, in the deliberateness of doing a quality work of it, of curating an artistic experience for everyone. I know in 2021, we curated the House of International Book and Art Festival as a virtual reality experience. We were able to take that, I think we showed it in Abuja in 2022, whereby you could literally wear a VR lens and you are transported into the festival. So it's maybe thinking about innovative ways of creating legacy also. When you mentioned 100 years, the only thing that came into my head, I was like, oh my God, AI, we don't need to do the festival. Maybe AI need to do it. At that point, you don't need to be in a space. So it's a different kind of legacy of thinking about in terms of deliberateness. And it's the funny thing about identity. You only experience your identity when you are not in the space. The only reason we had the American literature called American literature because was Hemingway and Dress were in Paris, and in Paris they were Americans. In America, they're not really Americans because nobody is going to call you and say, hey, you're an American, you're in that space. And that's the thing with Northern Nigeria. Nobody calls me a Northern Nigerian.
Until you go to Lagos.
Only when I go to Lagos, that's when I become a Northern Nigerian. I'm not a Northern Nigerian. I'm either from Kaduna or from Tudunwada or from Zaria. So it's that those labels, those identities, they are created when you try to export, which is where the deliberateness comes, which is where carefulness comes, because the thing is when you say Northern Nigerian identity, it's mostly a Hausa Muslim identity, which is very monolithic, which is not the reality of what we're doing. So when we create things in Kaduna, and right now I'm going to just reference, we have 4 festivals outside of Kabafest. We have Hibab, we have Kaduna Fashion and Art Festival, we have the Mod Festival, we have the Dati Dance Festival. These are 4 different festivals, 4 different genres, 4 different artistic festivals, 4 different identities. So you can't say I'm going to go to Hibab to experience the Northern identity, which is completely different from what you're going to experience maybe at the Mod Dance Festival. So what is that Northern identity you're looking in terms of deliberateness? I think it's to give us that multiplicity of what it means to experience different contexts of identity. With Hibab, we celebrate literature and writing in Hausa. It doesn't matter who writes it, if it's written in Hausa, that's the identity of it. When you go to Mod Dance Festival, I'm sure you're looking at an artistic experience of what it means to be a Kaduna person through performance dance. when you go to CAF Art, you're looking at artistic works, you're looking at Imran Tilde's Hausa people on the moon with their Babariga. That's the kind of identity that's been created. So the deliberateness comes with the quality. The quality can only happen when there is a deliberate sustainability of the ecosystem, which goes back to the funding, which also translates to the legacy of it. So I feel it's completely interconnected in that angle.
So, Aisha, I want to go to, still with identity, still with legacy. Earlier, Grace was talking about, when you referenced government, you talked about the federal government, and we've also talked about state governments here as well. Interesting that Nigeria continues to struggle with what is the Nigerian identity. It seems that there might be a clearer, even if it's a skewed sense of what that identity is when you're outside Nigeria. When you're in Nigeria, it's a different conversation, and we keep insisting that there is no one Nigerian identity, which is true. But when we talk about national development, people say that it's important to have a holistic, that one identity. So I'd like you to explore for us how it is we can talk about the arts, how it informs Northern identity, and to what extent this can exist in the Nigerian identity, especially if we keep looking to government as a source of support.
This is a great question that you ask. So when you talk about legacy, sometimes it's not something that we can necessarily define right now. Sometimes it happens much later, especially with the arts and especially again with the fine arts. At this festival, when we're looking at the in memoriam of Laboyari, we heard him say he'd never thought people remembered his writings or he was going to be honored for his writings in this day and age until Kabafest honored him. So that is something coming much later to now honor someone who thought maybe he did not even have a legacy to fall back on. And we can see it as well with the passport of Malam Ilya that we saw. When Cyprian Equincy wrote that book, he probably did not think that an animator was going to come and introduce that book and make it probably something seminal to future generations of Nigerians via animation. And for me personally, I'm curating an exhibition at the MEC Shillong Museum in Lagos. It's called Ariwa with a question mark, where I examine what it means to be Northern and what it means to be a plastic artist, a fine artist working in Northern Nigeria, and how we navigate questions of our identity. Because what I have found in my practice is that we have many young artists now questioning the limitations that have been placed on them in the past as fine arts practitioners, as painters, as sculptors, right? Though they are questioning those restrictions for themselves. What do you mean that me as a Muslim man, I cannot be a figurative painter? So they are finding their ways around it and they are creating that identity for themselves and they are speaking for themselves. And at the same time, you have, people who may not necessarily be considered as part of the, Northern majority that everyone sees, but actually making very, very strong statements about Northern Nigeria and exploring the various identities that exist in this region through their works. So, and even for me, coming up with that exhibition, I went back to the poem of Saadu Zungur, right, who has this poem, Arewa Jumhuria Ko Mulukia, and, he's talking about, like, what it means to be Northern, and he goes through an entire, trip around the North and the different identities that exist. And it is just now for me in 2024 that that poem that he wrote in the 60s, I believe, is coming back to life. So yeah, I think legacy can be something long, and even finding identity and reshaping that identity is a long journey. But I think it is always important that at every point we're able to hold that mirror up to society and hear what we're saying. The legacy is going to come when we do the work that we're meant to do with sincerity, with the respect, and with the passion that we're meant to do it.
So we're in the last few minutes of the conversation before we go to Q&A. I want to talk about what support looks like across socioeconomic levels, right? Again, there really is a thread between everything from whatever this support is, the arts, identity, and then we talk about legacy, looking back, or in our case, we're now looking ahead, right? Grace, let me start with you. The accessibility of your form of art, right? how that translates, what support looks like, how it translates across, say, those of us here in the room today, or if we go to Sabongari and find one of the viewing centers there where maybe it's 15 naira to enter and watch a football match or something of the sorts. What does support look like across the socioeconomic strata?
The community, the people, encouragement to your words, to your family members that are artistic or they're creative or want to express themselves in one form or the other. The northern culture is conservative, in different spectrum that you will agree. And so when someone is creative and intends to express or say something, or most creatives are actually artistic people are a little cuckoo. That's what I personally believe, a little bit weird sometimes. And growing up, you don't know exactly, the people don't really know where to box you in and how to direct your energy because you're just everywhere. So it becomes very difficult for sometimes your parents or your family to allow you be yourself apart from do this and do this and do that. So what I'm saying is that the community should, when you have family members or someone, like I said last time, sometimes on social media you will see a lot of our community support someone that is daring, that is out, that is speaking out, that is stuff. I mean, like, go, some people like them, I love you, wallahi, and stuff. But then maybe the wife that you have or the sister that you have, you think she shouldn't take that course. So for me, support is encouraging to be different. If you're different or you have a gift or an ability, you should be allowed to express yourself. So in a conservative situation, when somebody dares to be different, by a G, it's story and stuff. And then I also think the judgmental, we're quite also very judgmental, and that inhibits creativity. So you see, again, I don't know if the feeling is the same. I grew up feeling, people will say people that do drama or something, scanning and stuff, but you're watching it in your house, like you're watching it. You enjoy it, you watch the whole series and you know all these things. Who do you think is doing those? Who is producing the movie? Who is the actor that is doing them? They have family members and again, another thing, I want to use this quick opportunity to say the amount of creative and insane. Like yesterday, the guy that came up and said he's married to the queen, I thought, ooh, that's a crazy guy, But the amount of talent I see on Ariwa, TikTok, or social media, because of my work, I have to do a lot of research. It's crazy. But guess what? Like the course, like people, like his fight, his war. In the last 2 weeks, I was telling someone today that I feel very depleted, that like my intelligence has gone down because I have to see these things, I have to do them because I'm looking for people and trying to get. Like those people, anybody that can actually constantly put a ring light and talk and stuff, I believe is a content or a producer or a creative person. Just use that energy into something else. The fight is too, so the support, anyway, I just diverted. The support is encourage ourselves because I really wanted to say that about Ariwa TikTok. Let's just do better.
Thank you, Grace. Sada, a final comment for you, from you on this. The room is full of a lot of people who are in the early stages of life. I know that we have maybe a couple of secondary school students here. We definitely have a lot of people who are in university in the room. Some people are in limbo between NYSC and what exactly they want to do with their lives. And these are people who are thinking they would support the arts if they had the money in their pockets today. So again, we're coming to that generation, 30 years from now. Hopefully you won't have to wait till you're in your 50s before you make money, you can dash to the arts, right? But what would you say to them to keep in focus so that 30 years from now, they've not forgotten where their heart really lies?
I don't know what I'm going to say to them, but
Should we wait 30 years?
maybe. I think the most interesting thing, I was just looking at it also, sometimes the art can be very elitist and with the society that we live in. When you think of artworks, it's about going to a gallery, holding a cup of wine or drink and taking a picture on it with your iPhone. That's a very high taste, high society, and that's art generally. But when you now look at the society we live in, even for people to afford to buy a ticket to come to a space like this, they need to be able to be at a certain level of society. So that's also why when you say you have to monetize everything, it becomes even more elitist in that aspect. I'm just going to give two examples of how legacy could be on different social
The socioeconomic
stratas
levels.
in Kaduna, for instance. I know the Critics Film Company, they were here last year. One thing that they do is they stream their movies in communities where they grew up, because these are boys that grew up in places where they were shooting movies with mobile phone before they got donations to do. So they go back to those communities and show films in public schools. Outside, they just put a screen and they show it. That's breaking a huge barrier. You don't know who among those little kids want to become a filmmaker, and maybe that's the only first time they're seeing somebody like them producing, directing, and acting in a film. That's a whole different strata. I know Mud Dance Company, what they do, and she was talking about cuckoo and mad people. When they do performance, a lot of people are like, what the heck are you doing? And what they do is to disrupt public spaces. They go to Central Market, Chicken Kasua, and just start dancing without their clothes on, just maybe with a small trouser and covered in mud. So that's already changing the psyche of the society, in that creativity can be in completely different forms. This is also a valid means of creativity. So in terms of legacy, this can all contribute to an everlasting legacy. It doesn't just have to be the fine one where you have to go to a gallery and take a picture, whether you understand what it is or not. You just look at it and go, that's not the only artwork that you can have.
Thank you, Sada. Aisha, as you, because I get a sense that you want to touch up on a couple of things they said, but Grace started to touch on hypocrisy, right, in the North and the way we consume the arts. I wonder what you would say about disabusing that hypocrisy in a way that the people with deep pockets who are being hypocrites can set it aside so that they can open their wallets.
I think a lot of it comes back to also encouraging the public and having public art forms. Last year in Kano, there was a monument that got demolished. That monument was created by an artist. It is a piece of art. And many of us in the North also have, taken in this thing that, oh, Northerners don't appreciate art. We don't care about art. But if you care about art, who are you to say that your brother too does not care about art? Have you tried speaking to them about it? And when that monument was demolished, perhaps because the demolisher had the idea that people wouldn't care, the backlash that he received was so overwhelming that he had to make amends with the artists and with the people because they saw it as something that represented them. So when you're able to support artists to create works that are more relatable to the people, they would come. Even those spaces that you think, okay, they think are too elitist for them, some people would walk to those spaces to go and consume those works. And to the people that are here, yes, there are people in your communities who are not able to attend, but when you go back to them, speak to them about Kabafest, and you will see the joy, the enthusiasm. Some of them, one or two of them, might write back to you and be like, oh, I went on YouTube and I watched the videos. I'll try to be there next year. So we also have that responsibility that when we consume something that our community is not able to consume, we go back to that community and we share it with them. And also our success, we have a responsibility to be successful. You want to be a writer, please write. You have the access. Not everyone in your community might have it, but please apply for everything you can apply for. Don't think because Aisha and Sumaya are already curators, the space is saturated. It is not even nearly quarter. In fact, we are just 2 drops in a massive bucket. So please, all of you that want to be curators, be writers. The space is not even saturated. We need your stories. Go out, be a success, and show your community so that tomorrow when another child says, oh, I want to be a writer, they can easily say, oh, look now, Sada studied pharmacy, he's a writer, and they can refer to you to and say, oh, now was she not a doctor? Now look at what she's doing, and they can see that you're a success. There's no better way to make art accessible than that.
Thank you, Aisha. All right, we're throwing over for questions. 2 questions. The first hand I saw go up, gentleman in glasses right at the end. Please keep it brief.
Yeah, very brief. Thank you very much, Nabila, for that wonderful session, and to everyone that is there. My comment is to Sada and everyone else that mentioned government briefly. And just to say that having worked in government for a bit, I feel like artists come from a place of being overly entitled when they approach the government for support. And I will back up my plane by saying this.
Would you like to say your name so that they can tackle you later?
Just find the guy with the glasses. And I say this because, of course, this is the give and take. If you don't provide that take, or you don't have anything to give, and it's all because of Nidan Kaduna, you have to listen to me, then it makes it look like the person you are approaching has no sense at all. And secondly, governance is a game of loyalty. And before artists approach offices, you have to think that maybe this person has also researched me or researched my work. And I go to your social media, my name 200 times before you even came to my office. And afterwards, I might also receive that same backlash from you 1 or 2 years after my support. These are all the things that goes through someone in the public office's head when you come in for support.
All right.
The
gentleman in glasses, I have to take another, because I only have two.
One last thing, Nabila.
The secret is I know your name.
Yes.
They might tackle me too.
Just one last thing, Nabila.
Yes.
And Sada, I also took an offense because the last time you were in my office, it was a space for workshop.
All right.
And
so
the comment here now goes that no support has been
You're
received.
You're going to make me call your name, and I want to avoid that. Can we get the mic to the next person, please?
So I kind of felt
it's clear that you and Sada know yourselves on a personal level. You will have this conversation over tea. Let's take another question. Can I get a lady? If you're a man, you might as well put your hands down now. There's a woman right in the center in front of the camera.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Please go ahead. We'll come back to the panel. I've been accused of discrimination. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Nabilah Usman. What he just said now about give and take, about the government, this question is directed to Sada. You know, sorry, it's not the give and take. We have a lot of I'm a writer, so we have a lot of writers in this country, not just in northern states of Nigeria. And those writers, they have made a lot of effort to secure very, very limited spaces abroad. But they don't have that means to relocate there for their studies. And what do they have to do? They have to create a GoFundMe campaign to do that right now. What they have done that, they have given the government to be one among thousands of applicants. They have done something. And at least, even if it is not a grant, they should get a loan, because immediately they get there, they are going to get that relocation fee.
Pardon me,
so
let me
now
interrupt
to
you. Yes, the question.
Yes. Now to Sada, what do you think, as you are also an MFA student, what do you think the government should do to tackle that GoFundMe campaign and everything that's happening? Thank you.
All right. Sada, we're short over time, a minute.
Okay. I'll start with Aaron's question. And maybe
He didn't ask a question, so you can skip him, and you just exposed his name. Over tea.
Okay. I apologize. Nabila was asking me about where we got funding from. I did mention that we got in-kind support from a lot of organizations. So I'm sorry. We got a space from KCTA. We did our workshop. It's out there documented in all of our work. To his comment, when we go to government, we don't go to politicians, we go to government, which is completely different. There are two different things when we think of it. And artists can be entitled, and it's a thing with the creative industry. They have a thing out there. Without entitlement, Lola will be able to curate this space. She had to push and say this needs to exist. Nobody is going to believe her. Like, what do you mean you want to do a festival? What's the purpose of it? That will be the pushback. So you need to push. In terms of give and take, I feel government, especially right now, there is a lot of focus on revenue generation, all of that. But I feel like there are spaces where revenue can be gotten, and there are spaces where that can't be gotten. I'm just going to give examples of where you mentioned identity and deliberateness. Government has the chance to use the art sector for whatever direction or agenda they want to push, what Nigerian identity you want to create. This is the best way to use culture, creativity, film, arts. That's one of the best ways to export governance to explore whatever you need. So I feel like that's a huge take that they can use in that aspect.
20 seconds.
Yeah, we've said a lot about give and take. And can I just add that we always expect the take to be instantaneous. That take is not always going to be instantaneous. In 2017 or 18, I attended a writers' workshop here at Kabafest, and I was a guest. It is only now in 2024 that, I am a curator of repute for my community, for Northern Nigeria, and I'm championing the Northern Nigerian agenda in numerous states. So that take will not be instantaneous, but it will come. So I think the government too should consider that, and that's a legacy to build on. And I will proudly say that I am part of Kabafest legacy. Thank you.
A round of applause for my panel, Grace Yakubu, Sada Malumfashi, Aisha Aliyu-Bima. Thank you. And you've been a lovely audience, despite the man in glass.